Another way ARCHway ignites hope is through our education and awareness opportunities. We incorporate education into all of our events, and we've recently instituted in 2020 virtual education and awareness events on a variety of topics, from care of the caregiver to trauma-informed care. We also released a book called Igniting Hope that is available on Amazon. And the purpose of the book is to share the hope that recovery is possible.
Well, I'm excited to talk about the book because Igniting Hope takes you through the process of recovery, and it shows you that hope is possible with the help of other people. We can't do the heavy lifting for the person in recovery, but we can be there to take their hand and hold it until they can see the light of the recovery themselves.
ARCHway helps to connect people to treatment and recovery resources, and eventually people realize that those solutions they do work when they work them.
Igniting Hope gives us a guiding light through the recovery process. It starts with the personal story of addiction. From that addiction, we find out that there's hope in recovery. As that hope is realized, we find out that recovery is not only possible, but there's also wonder in it. And then we take all of that energy, and the book concludes with the vision of ARCHway and how it has grown into the community of ARCHway, the people of ARCHway.
The book begins with information gathering around the realities of addiction, and it also shares the avenues or the pathways that you can go on to reach recovery. And it really encourages that kind of support along that process. And then in the end, you really see that challenge to kind of give back and grow the community as well.
From the book, as Emily said, we take those 4 elements: the information gathering, the educational, the encouragement, and finally the growth to promote recovery. It takes all of those elements, and through these authentic stories, it starts a ripple or a current effect, like a current coming down a river, and it picks up stuff on the way. And then finally it gets to the end, and it shows you the whirlwind effect that recovery can have, not just to the person who's in recovery, but to other people they tell their story to.
I like to call that sometimes the light of recovery. So when one person recovers, that person tends to help the next person who helps the next person. That's the same for caregivers. When the caregiver recovers as well, that caregiver gives back and helps the next person. Tonight is also about bringing faces and voices to those in recovery. And you can read the book, and I welcome you to do that, but you're also going to have a chance tonight to actually hear from some of the people who are mentioned in the book.
Innocence. This is true innocence. And if the teacher went around the classroom asking each child what they want to be when they grow up, the answers would be things like doctor, veterinarian, teacher, princess, athlete, astronaut, and ballerina. One thing that won't come out of their precious little mouth is, when I grow up, I want to be an addict. I want to choose alcohol over my family. I want to lose everything just so I can learn my lesson and pick myself up again. I want to depend on a drug to keep me from being sick or having anxiety at parties. No one grows up hoping for these things, but unfortunately, it does happen. And unfortunately, it is happening to our children.
I think what led me to substance use in the beginning was it was socially accepted and socially available.
I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. I didn't know where I belonged. So I think drugs and alcohol became a way for me to try to escape and to try to feel like I was somebody other than myself.
I always had like really low self-esteem, low self-worth, was shy, quiet. So alcohol and drugs kind of made me feel better about myself and be able to talk to people and just made me feel, normal.
I had so much guilt and shame around what I had not accomplished at that point. I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want anyone to see me back home not achieving the things that I thought I was going to achieve, or maybe they thought I was going to achieve. And it was just too much to bear. So that was like settling.
I think what led me to realize that I had a true substance use disorder was twofold. One being, once I finally did make a decision that I wanted to stop using substances, I couldn't do it. I could not sustain recovery for extended periods of time. And that's where certified peer specialists modeling recovery in an effective way, as well as access to Vivitrol, were really the two most impactful things that led me to be able to sustain recovery long term, both from a medication assisted treatment standpoint as well as from a community engagement perspective that made recovery seem appealing, seemed sustainable, and was really modeled in a way that made me want to engage.
I started losing things because of it, and then I couldn't stop. So, I was losing jobs and losing relationships and losing housing. And it became drinking was the way to cope with the things that I had lost without really the recognition that I lost those things because of drinking.
One thing I would want people to, know and understand about the reality of addiction is, people can and do get better, but they're not going to with limited to no resources. So whether it be an individual standpoint, a family standpoint, or a community at large standpoint, we really need to provide ready access to individuals who are struggling and put them in positions where they can get better.
We oftentimes tell our patients it affects your loved ones, your caregivers, more than it affects you.
Everyone was choosing substances over me. Like I had that typical mindset. But really it wasn't. Like I didn't understand the disease of addiction.
You woke up anxious, you woke up frustrated, you moved into the day and you went to anger. And then there was always the fear. Were you going to get the phone call that your loved one was in a hospital? Was it from the morgue asking you to come identify the body? Or was it from a prison? And would you accept the collect call?
The peer support specialist really was the difference maker in my recovery story. At one point in time, I asked some of the peers that helped me, I was like, how can I pay you back for this? And they just kind of laughed and said, I'm good. Pass it on to the next person. And that statement, that had a profound impact, not only on the way that I viewed recovery, but a way in which I wanted to live.
Peers can walk into a room and talk to a person who is still suffering with addiction and say, I understand how you feel. That's just something that you can't quantify. You either get it or you don't. And it's okay if you don't. But the power of peers is that you do.
Peers, probably better than most, understand how to meet the individual in recovery exactly where they're at because they've been there. And so we know how hard to push. We know when not to push. We know what to push on. And we know how to help the individual prioritize the 50,000 things they're told they have to handle on day 2.
ARCHway really tries to figure out where the gaps in care are and help fill those gaps in care. And so my purpose when I go into conversations with other organizations, treatment providers, housing providers, RCOs, prevention, is to find out what their gaps are, what their barriers are, and how Archway can help. It's the same with the people we help. You know, what's your current barrier and how can Archway help?
So as an advocate for Hope for Archway, I'm there to turn to, right? Whether that just be, you know, someone to talk through a situation, to help navigate through, you know, some resources, and maybe even, you know, to connect them to those resources. But I'm there to help that initial process become easier and smoother.
I've been able to impact change through the Archway Institute through a number of different ways, but one being the Advocates for Hope program. I've been able to, you know, answer the phone for individuals who are struggling. I've been able to plug them into recovery housing, to treatment, to medication providers. I've been able to provide support to loved ones needing help, doing professional and community education with Prevent Ed, the speaking engagements and sharing my story. It wasn't until I heard stories of hope that I began to believe in the recovery process. So I hope that by sharing my story, I can inspire others to engage in the recovery process. And not only that, but to give back when they have the opportunity to.
Most people want to feel a part of something, right? And they want to, whether it's a family, a team, a group, and you go to one of those, you know, Archway dinners, you feel like you're part of like a dynasty.
Archway has always been about hope, wrapping our arms around people, giving them the hope that they need to move from this stage to the next stage to the next stage.
The story and the legacy of Archway and the lessons we learn from John's recovery then ultimately is not about what happens or will we fall down or will we be hurt or will we suffer. It is about how we respond to those challenges and that adversity that ultimately tell our legacy and our story.
I challenge you after reading this book to be changed by what you read. Know that part of your fate was reading and learning about addiction and mental health. Be inspired to do something different. I also challenge you to find the fire within your own soul. What gives you the passion to keep going? What are your hopes and your dreams? What is your fate? When you figure it out, go for it. Don't let anyone or anything stop you, because with your work and God's help, anything is possible.